then from there, I started selling drugs. And, I go from just breaking it down, selling very small amounts of drugs at a time to, it went from small stuff to, 1 ounce, 2 ounce, half ounce, a pound. And it just kind of grew from there. And now, here I am living this life that I really have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I'm riding around. One time, Rome was going through a drought, and I come down to Atlanta. Here I am, this country white girl in this brand new Suburban pulling up. I've got $10,000 cash in the glove box. I got a pistol in the door. It doesn't even have bullets in it. Like like I had no fear of anything. Like, I don't know who I thought I was, but I was not afraid, is what it boiled down to.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. My good friend over at Doc TV had this guest on recently. I seen her story and said I got to get her on Crime and Entertainment. Please welcome Jennifer Rogers. Jennifer, how are you?
I am fabulous. How are you doing?
I'm doing better now that I got a Southern accent on the show because I seem to have a lot of New York and Boston and Rhode Island and California, but I don't get too many Southern accents. So it's a welcome sound on the show.
Well, thank you. They don't get much countryer than me, I don't think.
That's actually, I just wrapped up a show with Matt and I told him I was having you on. He's like, "Oh, the girl with the really thick Southern accent." I was like, "Yeah, that's her."
Yes.
So you've got a very interesting story. If I told you to kind of give the audience what they're in store for, to summarize your story in like a minute, how would you do that?
I would say that I got addicted to methamphetamines at 17 years old. Got indicted by the feds at 22, served 2 years in a maximum security federal prison, got out, completely turned my life around. And now I have several different organizations that I give back to incarcerated and impacted individuals.
That's perfect. You couldn't have said it any better. So with that, that'll let you know what you're in store for here today, folks. Let's just jump right into it. Jennifer, where did you grow up? Was you in the South when you grew up?
Yes. So I grew up in a very small town called Summerville, Georgia. It's in Northwest Georgia, barely on the map. I mean, it's very small.
Okay. So I live in Summerville, South Carolina, which is in Charleston. That's
Oh,
very
okay. I'm
interesting.
familiar.
Yep, Summerville, South Carolina. So, I mean, early life, like you were, if I'm not mistaken, what you were like pageants and different things like that. I mean, just
Yes. So I grew up in church. My mom had us in every possible like music church group that you could be involved in. We went to church every Sunday. We were in beauty pageants from the time we were very young. And I played every sport you could have possibly played because, when you're in a small town, there's not a lot to do. And so typically most kids are very athletic. And so my
right.
entire upbringing kind of looked like that.
Yeah, sports is kind of what brings the towns together in most cases like that.
Yes.
So everything's going good as a kid. What was high school looking like?
High school, I started to get involved with boys. My parents actually got divorced the summer of my eighth grade year. And when that happened, it really disrupted our lives, all of our lives, and mine particularly because I was at that age where, I was just coming into puberty and my life had been a certain way. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't look like that anymore. And so our home went from this very loud, vibrant, environment to very quiet and very depressing. And while the adults were, taking their time getting their lives figured out because they had been married for over 20 years, The younger kids were going back and forth between the houses, and I was kind of left to my own devices a lot of the time. And I was feeling very lonely and very depressed, and no one ever knew it. And so I started to look to fill that void. And initially, it started with boys. And then when that no longer kind of sufficed. It started turning into partying in this town that I grew up in every weekend. We're hanging out at one of my friends' houses and we're all, drinking and smoking weed with her parents. And none of our parents knew that was just the place we were spending the night at. And so that's kind of where it started. And then my high school boyfriend and we had dated for 2.5 years. We ended up breaking up, and when that happened, I actually moved schools and went into a school outside of Rome, Georgia. Well, when I did that, I didn't know anyone. And, I wasn't cheering there. Some things had happened, and I started kind of getting in trouble here and there. And eventually, I was working at this store in the mall called Claire's, and my
Mhm.
store manager at that store s- confided in me at some point and told me that she was trading store merchandise for methamphetamines. And at that point, I had no knowledge really of what it was. I was captain of my all star cheerleading co ed squad, and we were a travel all star squad, very good. I worked there also. And so my life was pretty much on the straight and narrow, but I still had that void within myself where I was searching for something.
Mhm. So, and then it just kind of progressed, from there, I'm assuming, or if you haven't tried it at that point, right? She just
No, I
confided in you that she was selling it.
Yes, yes. So I had not tried it. And honestly, the crazy thing about this entire story is that in the fifth grade, I won the Dare Essay Award. And all through middle school, I was working with the sheriff's department with this program called Safety Pup. And I was literally going around to schools teaching kids to not do drugs. And here I am, a junior in high school at this new school. I'm working at this store in the mall with this lady named Tracy, and she was like the craziest looking thing you've ever seen in your life. And she had crazy energy. So she was just like different. Like her bangs were like up to here on her head, and she would wear her ponytail with like all these scrunchies stacked up. And so it would be like a cascading like thing on the top of her head. And I don't know. I should have known better just based off like how crazy she was, but there was something about her that I was just drawn to. I don't know. So eventually she begins to confide in me that she is using methamphetamines and that she's actually trading store merchandise to these three women that were coming in the store regularly to get meth from them. And so she starts talking to me kind of about the effects of it. Well, my best friend in high school that I had met at this new school, she had actually tried it before. And I remember when she showed up at the school for the first time, she was like, she had kind of disappeared for a little bit. And she was like, oh my gosh, like her pupils were so big. And I was like, where have you been? And she was like, oh my gosh, I did meth. And I was so mad at her over that. Like, I just could not believe that she did that. And so from there, she and I started to talk about it. So as Tracy is continuing to kind of make her like play into this situation, about, oh, if you want to try it, Amber and I are continuing to have this conversation. Well, one day her drug dealer comes into the store and he's this young, attractive guy from Atlanta, like buff. And I'm like, well, good Lord. Like if he's doing it, it cannot be that bad because look at him. And so that basically kind of started the situation of, hey, let's try this. So we made the plan and we said we were spending the night at each other's house. Well, we went to her house that night and, he comes too. And she gets it out and breaks it down and, puts it on this tin full and shows me how to use the lighter. And we get high. And it was like a feeling that I had never felt before. I mean, we were literally up talking all night long. And I'm 17 years old, Miss Armurchie High School, captain of my co ed cheerleading squad. And here I am sitting in this woman's house that I just work with getting high on methamphetamines.
That's how it starts.
Yes, yes. So from there, I wasn't initially hooked on it in the beginning. So some situations had occurred after that. I had been seeing this boy, and I went and saw him afterwards, and he tried to force himself on me. It scared me, and then I didn't sleep for 2 days. And so from there, I was like, I don't know about this. I just wasn't like overly into it at that point. And then as I began to speak to another friend of ours, I found out that she actually also was using. And so once I found that out, I went and got high with some of the people that she got high with. And it was like older adults that were in her family. And so here I am getting high, at 17 years old. And we're talking like 50, 60-year-old people. And here we are just, smoking meth out of a light bulb with a straw at this point. And so once I started to do that, I started to just feel this rush and this feeling of like, I can do anything. And I liked that because it just amplified kind of who I already was. And I was addicted at that point.
Okay, so I gotta interject. Well, I've never done meth, but you said light bulb with a straw. That's how you do that there?
So, a lot of people will smoke it in glass pipes, like a glass bowl with a,
That's what
with a
I've
hole at the
seen.
top.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, but at this stage, I'm around people that are literally putting it in a light bulb and melting it down, and they have either a straw or like a pin cap in it, and they're melting and you're pulling it out. And I didn't know any different. I mean, wasn't from that world, and so I'm
Right.
just doing it how everybody else is doing it.
Yeah, I remember one of the first time I'd ever smoked weed in my life, the guy made a water bong out of like a 2-liter Mountain Dew bottle, and
Mhm.
he'd done all and I was just like I'm sitting there just so enamored with what he was doing. I guess people that know how to do all that especially that was like at a young age too. I'm just like, how do you learn how to do all this? Like, how do you take a damn 2-liter Mountain Dew bottle and turn it into whatever you're doing? And then I tried to do it
Listen,
later on and made a big mess.
the people that I have done drugs with are some of the most intelligent and creative people that I have ever met in my entire life. And if you could just pull those individuals out of that lifestyle and teach them how to shift that into something that they can do legally to make money. I mean, man, the things that have witnessed and even that I learned in that part of
Yeah.
my life. I mean, it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I always said that the people that I've interviewed throughout doing this podcast going on 4 years now, like, had a lot of them harness that energy towards anything legitimate. They probably could have ran companies, but,
Oh,
they
for
just it
sure,
was
for sure.
so, by now, it's really got a hold of you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I am using frequently and no one really knew it. That was kind of the sad part about it is, I am like literally living this double life. And in that
Mhm.
double life, I'm going to school and I had gotten so good at kind of faking it is that when my pupils would be so dilated, I would put these brown contacts in my eyes when I would go to school so that, people couldn't tell that I was high. And the main indicator that would have allowed someone to know is that I began to lose a significant amount of weight. And so when that started happening, I had people ask me, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm taking yellow jackets from the gas station. And my parents did not know, but I was starting to miss school. And so I started having all these absences because I'm hanging out, with drug dealers and with drug addicts. And so they're not in school because they're all adults at this point. And so
Right.
me and my younger crew of people that I'm hanging out with, we're in high school, but the majority of the people that we were doing drugs with, they were old. I mean, like, old people, and the ones that weren't old, I mean, they were still late 20s, early 30s.
Wow. So, I mean, but eventually that's gotta catch up though, right? Where you can't hide it as good as you were. I mean, I think that's how everybody starts it, right? You wanna be able to hide it and mask what you're doing, but if it continues to grab a hold of you, sooner or later, you just can't hide it anymore.
There was one instance at school where I had went to school one day, and a guy that I went to school with, who I'm actually friends today, and I need to ask him, does he remember saying this to me? But he said to me one day, he was like, "You look like you're on drugs." And I was like I was so offended by the fact that he said that to me, but I was on drugs and he just noticed enough to know that I was. And
Mhm.
no one else knew. And eventually some of my very close friends did know, and the guys that I was friends with, and the one particular friend of mine, his name was Justin, and he was mad. He was like, "This isn't you," but he had seen his older brother go down that path. But outside of that, no one knew, and they didn't know until I ended up wrecking my car 60 days from senior graduation, and I had fallen asleep at the wheel because it was the first night that I hadn't been high, and I fell asleep going to the dope dealer's house because I had left from where I was, and I was so disoriented. It was at like 5:30 in the morning. I turn onto the street and I don't remember anything else until my car goes over an embankment and I'm taking this privacy fence up out of the ground. And like so disoriented. I couldn't remember where I was going. I could have easily just crawled through the passenger side of the car and gotten out, but I just was out of it. I couldn't function. And finally, the police show up, and I had found my phone, and they get me out of the car, and I'm talking to my friend Amber, who I had been using drugs with. She's dating a police officer, and not just dating one, but she's actually living with him. And he has no idea that we're living this lifestyle. And if he knew, we were unaware that he knew. And so I'm on the phone with her in the back of the ambulance, and she tells me I'm about to get arrested. And I'm like, "For what?" And she was like, "They found meth in your car." Now, mind you, I did not know that meth was in my car because I wasn't ever carrying it. I wasn't dealing it. We were just young high school, like attractive girls. We hung out in these groups of men, and they just would get high with us. We didn't have to buy it. We didn't have to pay for it. We were just there hanging out, partying. And so I honestly didn't know that that was in my car. So they arrest me for possession of methamphetamines, and it is a Sunday morning. And the police officer comes up to my car and he shines his light in the window and he asked me, where was I going so early on a Sunday? Well, honestly, I did not know. I could not remember where I was going. And so I said the first logical thing that I can come up with, and that was, I'm going to school. And he starts to write it down, and then he's like, "You're going to school on a Sunday?" And then it just clicked. I remembered, no, I knew I was going to the dope house, but I was going because I was gonna, I wasn't gonna say that, but I was actually going to wash my clothes so that I could get ready for work because I was working a double that day. So by that point, because, I say this ridiculous thing, and then I'm sure I just looked out of my mind because they search my car, they find a piece of meth, they arrest me. So here I am, like 60 days out from my senior graduation, the week that I'm supposed to crown for Miss Armurchie, and I've been arrested for a felony drug charge. And I had to call my mom because I can't get Brent, my best friend, on the phone because he's knocked out somewhere because he's not up high. And my mom ends up coming and getting me out. My dad's there. First, they didn't get me out. First, they show up together like this united front, which they had not been since their divorce. And they're like, "You have a drug problem and we're not getting you out unless you go to Wynwood." Now, Wynwood was not a drug rehab facility. It was like where they sent crazy people to. And so I am screaming at them to the top of my lungs, "I don't have a drug problem," which only further confirms that I had a drug problem.
Yeah.
So they didn't get me out. They sent me back in. And so I go in, I get into medical diagnostics, and the lady in medical, she was like, "Honey, I don't know if you have a drug problem or not." She was like, "But at least if you went to Wynwood, you would be a person there. Here, you're just a number, and you're a very young, attractive girl, and someone back there is going to try to make you their bitch." And I just started crying because I didn't know what that meant. I had no exposure. So my parents ended up coming and getting me out. because I made a deal with them that I would go take a drug test, and if I passed the drug test, that I didn't have to go to Winwood. Well, I had a plan. I was gonna go to school on Monday, business as usual. Brent was gonna bring me something to the school to flush my system. I was gonna pass that drug test, and I was just gonna keep living the life that I had been living because in my mind, there was nothing wrong with what I was doing because I wasn't harming anyone. And so they end up not letting me go to school. And in the midst of all of this, not only is it made the front page of the newspaper, but it's all over the radio stations. Miss Armurchie High School arrested for possession of methamphetamine, says she's going to school on a Sunday. So I mean,
They ain't
bad
had to
just
do all
went to
that.
worse. Yes, bad just went to worse.
Wow. So that's even like getting blasted pre-social media days.
Oh my gosh. I'm pretty sure my mom still has that newspaper article somewhere in a storage bin.
I mean, we can laugh about it now. We can laugh about it
Yes.
now, but I'm
Yes,
but
we
I'm sure
can.
at the time that had to be horrible. Like you said, so close to graduation, and then when the small town, that's the talk of the town and everything else. That's got to play a big part.
It was, and then not only that, I mean, I wasn't allowed to graduate because I was an out of area student, so I literally had to drop out of school. I went and got my GED, and then right after that, I ended up getting pregnant, and that was with the person that I was in a relationship with, and, he knew that I had been arrested, but he didn't know, that I had this drug problem,
Mm,
and so, here I am making matters, went from bad to worse at this point. And now, not only have I lost my life to this drug situation, but now I have a baby on the way. And so it was like, you know, I was just I don't know. I don't know where my mind was at that point. It was all over the place. It was racing. I was looking for something to fix my life and there was no fixing it because I had a problem. But I didn't, I don't think that I really understood at that point that I really was addicted to drugs because to me it was fun and it was my friends and
yeah.
I felt accepted by them. No matter what I did or who I showed up as, they just accepted me for me. And that was the other kind of appeal that I had to it. And not only that, but I had a weight complex. And, the drugs made me very thin. And so it was like all of these issues that I had carried of self worth issues from my childhood, they're showing up here. And I'm 18 years old. And I mean, it was bad.
Yeah. I know you said you had a plan to try to pass that test. They didn't send you to school. Did you wind up still having to take the test?
Yeah. So my mom and I got into an argument that morning, and they didn't send me to school because they thought I was going to run away. And so she took my cell phone away from me, which only further pissed me off because, I had kind of been taking care of myself at this point. I'm paying my cell phone bill. I'm like, you're taking my cell phone. Like, I'm paying for that. I am an adult at this point. And so here we are in the situation. We end up going to the hospital and they're to the ER for them to drug test me. Well, I knew that I was an adult by law. And so if I said I didn't want them to come back there, that they had to not let them come back. And so we're getting ready to walk back there and I was like, I don't want them in the room. Oh, it made them so mad, but there was nothing they could do about it. So we
Right.
get back to the back and there is a phone on the outside wall of that room. Well, I know I'm about to fail this drug test. And so I'm calling Amber, I'm calling Brent. I'm like, listen, I'm about to fail this drug test and I'm not going to Winwood. So I need y'all to be ready to get me out of jail. It's taking forever for the results to come back. And so then they finally come back, and of course, they tell me I failed it for meth. So I go out to the lobby by myself, and I was like, well, I passed it. And they were like, we want to see the results. And I'm like, okay, I failed it for traces of methamphetamines. Like, what does that even mean? Like, it just made it sound better in my
Yeah.
drug addict mind, that it was just a
Not as
little bit
bad
I
if it's
felt.
trace.
Yeah, it was just a little bit that I failed it for, not a lot. And so
It's
my parents are, they're all crying. They're like, "You need help." And my dad like puts his hand around my arm and his whole hand went around my arm. That's how thin I was. He was like, "Look at you. Look at what you're doing to yourself." And I was like, "I look good like this." Like I really felt that I looked good like that because I wanted to be thin because I had been picked on about my weight my whole life from like 5th grade all through high school. Because where I grew up, if you were not rail thin skinny as a white girl, you were fat. And
Yeah.
so I had this complex, and that only further complicated the entire situation. So I refused to go to Winwood. So we get out to the parking lot and we're getting in the car, and my dad's like, "Should we put her in the back seat in the middle because she might jump out of the car?" I was like, "Jump out of the car? I am not crazy. Like, there's nothing wrong with me." But they really thought that I had lost my mind. So we get to the jail. My stepmom whispers in my ear, "I know you can do this. I believe in you. Just go to Winwood." So in that moment, I decided I was going to go. And I really meant that I was going to go. But my parents were so fed up with my shenanigans. My mom was like, I was like, "Okay, I'll go to Winwood." She just throws her hand up. She's like, "Call me when you're serious." So the jailer comes out there and pulls me in by my arm, and then of course, I get my phone call, and I call Amber and Brent, and he sends somebody up there to get me out. So, but I get bonded out by this older couple that we had hung out with and that we used drugs with. And my parents had that jail on such lockdown. They knew who bonded me out and when and what their phone number was. And so they called them, "We're her parents. She needs help. She's a drug addict." And they said to her, they said, "She may have a drug problem, but Floyd County Jail is not the place to fix it." And so I went back to their house. I snorted a line that night, and I was just so like, my life was in such disarray that it didn't even do anything to me. I fell asleep, and then I woke up the next morning and I went to my dad's house. Well, it wasn't right after that is when I ended up getting pregnant with my oldest daughter, and her father. And that gave me a little bit of purpose in that moment. And I was like clean on the straight and narrow. But our relationship was not in a great place because he was leaving to go to the military. He signed up to leave early for boot camp. That made me feel some type of way because here I am, pregnant. And I felt abandoned, and it kind of brought up those abandonment wounds that I had from my childhood and my parents'
Yeah.
divorce. And I felt very alone and isolated. And so I ended up going back and hanging out with my drug friends because they knew the situation. They knew that I was pregnant, and they had been there for me through all of it. So I'm hanging out with them. I'm just crying all the time. And time goes on, and it comes around, and I have her. And when I had her, I had made a vow in that moment that I would never go back and get high again because I had experienced a love that I had searched for my whole life.
Mhm.
And eventually I had broke that promise because at the end of the day, I was still this broken young woman on the inside that was really stuck at an age in my childhood where I never received love or what I needed as a child. And so, of course, I go back to what I know. I go back to what is happy for me. I go back to wanting to be thin again. And so now here I am back getting high. And her father and I ended up getting married. We ended up going and getting stationed in Washington State. But before that happened, I had to go to court on that drug charge. Well, they dropped it to a possession of drug related objects, and I pled out first offender. They gave me 12 months of unsupervised probation and a fine. So I had to report one time. I went in on that one time to report, and she drug tested me, and I failed it for meth. Now, at this point, no one knew that I was getting high again because I wasn't getting high all the time. I was just getting high occasionally. And I honestly wasn't expecting her to drug test me. I had never been on probation before. I didn't know what any of this meant. And so now here I am. I failed this drug test. She calls me like 5 days later, and she was like, "Well, I am calling because you failed this drug test for methamphetamine." So of course I lie and said I had went to a party and I messed up, and she was like, "Well, I don't know what the judge is going to do, but you're on first offender and she may violate you." And so she of course I don't say anything to anybody. Now I tell like my drug friends, but I don't tell anybody in my family till I get that confirmation, and they ended up violating me. So I had to serve, they violated me for 60 days, and in Floyd County Jail I got a 2 for 1. So it was 30 days in county jail, and they ended up letting me break it up into 2 weeks. But now here I am, he's in the military in boot camp. I have this baby, that's 3 or 4 months old. Now I have to tell my family that I'm going to jail, and they think that I have totally turned my life around because I look like I have. So that was a disaster within itself. And of course, I stick to the story. I got high. I was at a party. I blamed one of my friends, and they wanted to believe it because I did look like I had gotten my life together. So I serve this time in jail. I get out. I move out to Washington State with her father, and I totally turn my life around in this 8 month period of time. I'm running an all star cheer gym there, but our marriage is miserably failing. And in the failure of that marriage, I came home after being out there like 8 or 9 months at Easter, and I ended up going and getting high again for the first time. And when I did that, it was like I felt like I was missing out on the world. And I was determined at that point that I was leaving that life in Washington behind because I was so miserable in it, and I was coming back home. And I did. And it started out very casual at first, getting high, here and there on the weekends. And then here and there on the weekends became an everyday thing. And it just, a snowball effect began from that move back.
Now, did your kid come back with you?
Yes.
Alright, so I'm
Yes.
assuming are people picking up on it that it's kinda becoming a problem again?
No, no one has any
So
idea.
you're hiding this very well.
Very well.
Wow.
Yep.
So
'Cause I took care of myself. I was never a skin picker. My teeth were always very nice. I Where a lot of people when they get on drugs, they have, they pick their skin and they're not taking care of themselves. I was the exact opposite. And people even ask me to this day, like, you did meth for 5 years. How does your teeth look like that? And I was like, I would literally brush my teeth for like 45 minutes at a time, geeked up. Like that is what I would obsess over was my teeth. And so, it's like they say you walk through the fire not smelling like smoke, and I'm very lucky that all of the things that I experienced that I was able to walk out and not look like the things that I've been through, because I did have a very, very dark road in that lifestyle. And what started out as just using drugs turned into me getting a job in a nightclub in Atlanta. And then from there, I started selling drugs. And, I go from just breaking it down, selling very small amounts of drugs at a time to, it went from small stuff to, 1 ounce, 2 ounce, half ounce, a pound. And it just kind of grew from there. And now, here I am living this life that I really have no idea what I'm doing. Like I'm riding around. One time Rome was going through a drought. And I come down to Atlanta with these two guys. I have $10,000 cash. I really don't know them. I know of them, but personally know them, I do not. So they were bringing me down to Atlanta to this like really dangerous area of Atlanta in this trailer park where, there was known to be large quantities of meth. And here I am, this country white girl and this brand new Suburban pulling up. I've got $10,000 cash in the glove box. I got a pistol in the door. It doesn't even have bullets in it. Like like I had no fear of anything. Like, I don't know who I thought I was, but I was not afraid is what it boiled down to.
And did that deal go off without a hitch, just out of curiosity?
Yes, that well, it went off without a hitch, but the dope that they brought out, it was bad. It was like all kind of cut up, and I just like slung it back at the guy. I was like, I'm not buying that. And so I ended up coming back empty handed. But I mean, they could have robbed me. I could have been missing, and no one would have ever found me. And for the area in which I was in, it would have been highly usual for that to happen. But I just never was afraid.
I almost think maybe they even thought the fact that you went there would have been like, "All right, this maybe ain't the chick to do this to."
I
Like,
don't
that you
know.
had the
Listen,
balls to go there, you know what I'm saying?
that or I just have some serious guardian angel somewhere watching over my and I the guarantee you if that's the case, they always have been smoking cigarettes my whole life. Like, oh my God, she's never gonna make it out of this one.
So you are you still using while you're dealing, or did you kinda let the
Oh
using
yeah.
go and okay, so you're doing
No,
both. You're
I'm
that
doing
and that's
both.
the worst too, so you're using the product and you're dealing it. Wow.
Yes. Yeah. And with meth and you've never done it, but it didn't take a large quantity of it. And
Mhm.
luckily I never got into like shooting up or anything like that. And so it never got to that point and I'm very thankful that it did not, but the people that I did run with they had some, they had some morals about themselves when it came to, even though we're doing this thing, don't cross this line. Don't
Right.
be around anybody that's crossed this line because that's a slope you will never come back from. And
Mhm.
so, I'm living this life and it was fast and it was fun and growing up I always wanted to be like an actress and famous and in this little drug world in this small town, that's what it felt like. They called me Hollywood Jen. And every time I would, roll up, I'm looking like I've stepped off the red carpet because, my hair's done, my makeup's done, I'm dressed nice, I'm driving this fast and furious looking car that you can hear a mile down the road. It's like I'm living the high life. And you really can't tell me that there's anything wrong with what I'm doing because I've got all this money. I'm buying my daughter whatever she wants. And really, what she wanted was my presence. But I'm giving
Right.
her presents because I think that that's what love is.
Mhm. Wow. Hollywood Jen, I like that.
Yeah.
Call me Hollywood Ways.
I see that.
Not for those reasons, but so, I mean, do you just progress in the selling of it? Do you get bigger? I mean, obviously you got if you're in the right kind of club there in Atlanta, you're gonna have a nonstop customer base, I'm sure.
Well, no. So I actually was not selling in Atlanta. I
Okay.
got, I got drugged on my 21st birthday in the club. And after that, I was like, I cannot do this anymore. And so once that happened, I went back to my friend who he and I had dated off and on, and I asked him to front me a quarter ounce, and he did not want to. And I was like, look, if you don't, I'm going to get it from somebody. At least, if I'm getting it from you, it's safe. And so he ended up agreeing to give it, to do it because I wasn't having it any other way. And so I broke that quarter ounce down and, was just selling it in little amounts. And I saw how much money was in it. And once I saw that, oh, it was game over. I went from that to, an ounce and 2 ounces and 3 ounces. And then he ended up violating his probation. And when that happened, all of his clients started coming to me. So at that point, now I am moving weight because, now there's all these people that were going to him and they know that I'm now kind of where he was. And so now I'm like really a drug dealer. And I'm like living this crazy life. I mean, at any given moment, I would have, 8 ounces of dope in the center console and $10,000 cash. And I just rode around like that, bumping rap music out of my stereo, in my amp and my speakers. And I'm rattling the windows out of people's houses going down the road. Like I really went from like Miss AHS to like the thug of Rome, Georgia.
Yeah. Don't even try to be inconspicuous.
Right, just dumb, just felt like I was untouchable is really what it boiled down to because I was not from that. So I really prison and jail and none of it was ever a concept in my mind that I was like that's going to happen to me. Now, I will say as I got further into it and as I started getting into larger circles of people, I began to have these realizations. And I remember sitting with one of my friends. He was older. He was one of the first older people that I had done drugs with, and I had remained friends with him. And he really did like care about me and my life. He was like, you really should get out of this. But I had a conversation with him one night and I was like, if we don't change our lives, we're going to end up dead or in prison. And at that point, I knew, but I was so involved in it that I just couldn't get out because I wasn't just addicted to the drug, I was addicted to the lifestyle at that point.
Mhm. Yeah, that's what I hear a lot with people that are either selling it or whatever. It's that lifestyle that's so hard to quit, especially if you're making good money to stop that and then to try to go legit and what you make on a legit job, it's
Yeah.
just there's no comparison. It's so hard to do that.
Yeah, no, there's not. And it's like, and it was so easy, Why would I want to work? And I really didn't feel like there was anything wrong with what I was doing. So, in the midst of all of that, I had dated a police officer and that was from that town. He didn't know that I was using drugs because
God.
I hid it very well. So he's
Or selling them
actually
either, apparently.
Yes. So he is actually the one that like raised the alarm red flag to my parents because he had found out that he knew that I was dancing in Atlanta because I told him, but he and I weren't together anymore and he was mad and so he called my mom and told my mom that I was in this, dancing in the club in Atlanta and that he didn't know who I had watching Madison, but they were drug addicts and all this. And so my mom calls me freaking out. And I actually call her when I'm on my way home from the club. And I was like, yes, I am working in there. And I was like, but I'm not a drug addict. And no, I don't have drug addicts watching Madison. And like, he needs to mind his own business. So her and my dad show up at my apartment. Now, mind you, I'm living in like the nicest place of apartments you can live in Rome at the time. They show up with this home drug test united front trying to force me into taking this drug test. Now, at this point, I am 21 years old. Y'all are not paying my bills. I am living the high life and I am not taking that drug test. But they were like just adamant that they were going to force me into it. So I went to the bathroom and poured orange Listerine in the cup and brought it back and handed it to them. And my mom looked at it. She took the lid off. She was like, "This is Listerine." And so that is the first time that I ever, like, cussed my parents out, and I did. I was like, "Y'all can get the F out of my house. Like, you have not been here for me. I am an adult. I am paying for all of this stuff. Like, I don't need you, and you can leave." And so from there, I ended up getting evicted out of that apartment because I was reported for drug activity. And that was really where the start of the real trouble started coming in because from that point, uh, my someone had called defects on me and my daughter, and so I'm faking drug test for them, but it made things a little bit more difficult. And during that time period, I actually had stopped using drugs for a little bit. And it was in that moment that I realized that I had a problem because of how terrible I felt while I was coming off of those drugs. Like it felt like I had like demons coming out of me. Like that's the best way that I could describe it. And I ended up getting her back. And it wasn't long after that that I ended up starting selling drugs again because I needed money. And so one night I had dropped off a half a pound to this guy's house and I left there and I was like, listen, this is it. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to pick Madison up. I'm leaving town. I don't want to live this life anymore. So I left his house. And when I left his house, a Rome City police officer pulled out behind me and I knew that my license were suspended. So I pull into this hair salon that my friend's mother owned, and he goes down. He doesn't pull me over. He goes down. I cut the car off. I cut the lights off. He turns around and comes back. It was within like 3 to 5 minutes. He comes back, hits his lights, comes up to my window, asked me for my license and registration. And I said, why? Because I knew that I had not broken any law that in order for him to be able to question me because I hadn't. But he had prior knowledge that my license were suspended. Well, that's not legal because you
Mhm.
hadn't ran my tag. So he asked me again. I say why. We do this little song and dance for a second. And then he says, your license are suspended. Step out of the car. You're being arrested. So he gets me out. I'm sitting in the back of the car. They're just sure that they're going to find dope on me. I mean, for hours, he's searching my car, and I do not have drugs. The only thing that I had in that car was I had a pair of scales, but they had nothing on them, and I had a box of unopened sandwich bags. But I had all kinds of stuff. So that was in my car. That's not illegal to have because it's just a kitchen scale. And so I also had in the trunk of my car, there had been this run in with the feds with this sex shop for like money laundering. And a girlfriend of mine had called me earlier that day and she was like, oh my God, I got all these sex toys. Like, come get this stuff, like, give it away, sell it. I don't care, but just come get it. So I leave her house with like grocery bags full of body butters, dildos. I mean, you name it, it was in that bag. So this police officer is just convinced, like he's trying to take my CD player, my amp, my speaker, all this stuff apart because he's just sure that I have drugs hidden in that car. He picks the bag of one of those grocery bags up and the bottom rips out and dildos scatter all over the ground. And he's like red, scrambling to pick them up. I'm talking all the shit in the back of that cop car. I'm like, yeah, MFer, that's what you get. Because I knew that I didn't have anything. So we get to the jail and they said, what are you booking her for? I'm unbothered because I know I got the cash on me. I'm about to bond out for driving on a suspended license. He says possession of meth, possession with intent to distribute, pills not in original container, theft by services, singular ghost phone, concealed tag, altered tag, no proof of insurance, and driving on a suspended license. And he said, oh, and also make sure you pull her prior because I don't want her to bat her pretty little blue eyes and get out of this one. And I was like, what? I was stunned because I knew for 100% fact I did not have drugs on me. So I'm in jail. I go up for my bond hearing. They give me a $55,000 bond. I already had a bondsman lined up that was coming to bond me out. My mom shows up because works in the court system and they pull me out of first appearance. They want to know where my daughter is, will not release me back into the jail until I tell her. And she's like, these are serious charges. You are not going to get a bond. I was like, I already have a bond and it is about to be signed. Like, that's the truth. And I did not have drugs on me. So I get back into the jail. My bond is signed and they hold me for 3 days on a signed bond for temporary custody of my daughter to be taken away and given to my mom. And so when
Wow.
I get into the courtroom, the judge is like, you can't take care of your daughter while you're in jail. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I have a signed bond. It has been signed for 3 days, and I know that I have been held for 3 days on this signed bond so that y'all could have this hearing so that you could give custody to my mother. Like I knew what it was. And so he gives my mom temporary custody. She and I go in a room and she was like, you have got to change. You have got to get it together for Madison. Like, this is bad. You could go to prison. You could end up dead. And so I get back to the jail and they release me immediately when I get back. So now here I am. I'm out. I am totally devastated by, the loss of custody for my daughter, but I was so addicted to that lifestyle. I just could not change. I could not in that moment. And I would go to my mom's house at night and I was all she knew. And she would just hold my face at night and mommy, I just want to go home with you. And it would eat me up so bad that I could not take her, that I would leave and I would just get so high that I became this unrecognizable person to everybody, including myself. And eventually, I ended up her father filed for an emergency custody. They declined it because he had not had enough involvement in her life. The judge that was on our divorce case was also on my state case. So I ended up beating that case. They had to throw the whole thing out because it was an illegal stop, illegal search, illegal seizure. So we never even got to the evidence part. It was illegal for him to even question me and arrest me because I had not broken any law in order for him to pull me over in the first place that he was aware of. So the judge is going to give me custody of my daughter back. And I ended up getting arrested on the same day they threw that case out in another county. Somebody else was driving. I was in the back seat. There were 4 of us in the car, or 3 of us in the car. His license were suspended. We went through a roadblock. There was weed in the car. He had scales and he had creatine because he would cut his dope with that. And
Mhm.
he didn't claim anything. And they charged us all with marijuana, possession of meth, and possession with intent to distribute. So
Damn.
here I am in jail again, and I end up losing full custody of my daughter after that. And when that happened, I went crazy. I lost my whole mind and I sold more drugs and I got more high. And I honestly got to a place in my life where I didn't want to live anymore. And it wasn't long after that that I ended up getting a federal indictment. And when the federal indictment came, it's funny because I remember I was laying in bed one night and I prayed to this God that I no longer believed in because I was so angry. I was like, "You just need to take my life because I cannot do this anymore." And so I end up getting this federal indictment and my life was taken and I didn't mean like that. Like I didn't want to breathe anymore. Like
Yeah.
end it for me, you know? And so now here I am with this federal indictment and my parents are so scared to death they won't get me out because they think I'm tied to the mob or the mafia or the cartel. They don't know, they've never experienced anything like this. In their mind, I'm one of these people off these TV shows. So it snowballed effect to down to the point where and at that point in time when that happened, I was homeless. I had lost everything. All I had was my car. I was living out of my car, bouncing around. I had no money. It was really, really bad.
Wow. To circle back really quick, the trumped up charges about you having meth the prior time, did he just say that to try to hold you there? Was that just part of that? Because I mean, obviously it got kicked out, but I mean, like you didn't have
Oh
anything that
no,
first time.
he charged me with it. He threw everything he could up against the wall to see what would stick.
Yeah. And that's what people don't understand, that cops do that. Like, even if
Oh
they
yes, they
know
do.
it's not gonna stick or it's not gonna stay, or if it's not even true, they're just gonna throw it on there. And if it sticks, it sticks. If it don't, it don't. But it looks bad.
It
And
looks
those kind
bad.
of those kind of things
It
affects your bond and things like that.
Oh, yeah, and it did look bad because, I mean, it had my mom scared to death. It was in the newspaper, of course, it was on the radio. I mean, here I am with all these charges, and it did look bad, and I had no drugs on me.
Wow. That's just dirty. So you do wind up getting indicted. What I
Yes.
mean, are you on bond while this is going to trial? What's that like?
Yes. So once I got the indictment, I stayed in jail for 4.5 months. And while I was in there for like the first 2 or 3 weeks, I was sleeping the whole time. And by about the 10 days, third week, somewhere around in there, there was a church that there was like these volunteers with a church that would come in. And one day, this woman comes in and I just walk out of my cell and she walks up to me and she says, "Can I pray for you?" Well, I mean, at that point, I have lost everything. I have nothing left to lose but my life. And I asked for that to be taken. And so at that point, yeah, you can pray for me. And if I burn up in this moment, then, hallelujah. So she prays for me. She doesn't know why I'm in there. She don't know my name. And you cannot look at me and tell. And when she got done, she looked me directly in my eyes. She said, "You will never go back to your addiction again." And I knew in that moment that I'd never go back. It was like I could breathe again. for the first time. And so over the course of the next 4.5 months, I was in there. My parents could see the change in me because it wasn't just a change in how I talked, because they had heard me lie for years. They'd watched me self-destruct for years. And my mom ended up being the one that bonded me out. And so I got out on pretrial, totally turned my life around. I'm working, I'm depressed now. I'm depressed as hell. And I was also fat because I went from being so thin, no longer on drugs. My metabolism was shot. I'm eating all the time. I was very depressed. So I'm out for these 8.5 months. I'm speaking at these recovery groups. My life looks nothing like it used to. And I began to fight to be able to communicate with my daughter because my ex had cut off all communication with her. And so I'm fighting that. And then my federal sentencing comes up on the calendar. And the judge on my state divorce, he was going to order them to bring her to Georgia so that I could see her, because it was all on paper that I had changed my life. And so the calendar for my federal indictment sentencing fell on that same day. So he decided to pause that to see what happened on my federal case. Well, I go in front of the judge. I had recommendation letters, I mean, perfect pretrial report. And my mom gets up there and she's crying and she's like, I'm a court reporter. I see what it does to people that go to prison. The person standing in front of you today is not the same person she was when she committed this crime. Please, I'm begging you, do not send her to prison. And the judge just very matter of factly said, she may not be the same person that she was a year ago, but maybe she'll learn to have a little more respect for the law. The U.S. Attorney's Office is asking for 30 months. I'm going to round the 4 months that she did in federal holding up to 6, and I'm going to give her 24 months in a federal prison camp. And I just remember when I heard that, I was so numb. I just felt nothing. Like, I felt nothing. My dad's sobbing, my mom's crying. We walk out of the courthouse. They tell me I'm going to be able to self surrender. And we're outside of that courthouse and they are just crying. And I just, nothing, no emotion.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's also a weird thing too, self-surrender. I'd spoke with you about my situation and I had a chance to do that. And I didn't even know that was a thing, like self-surrendering. I didn't even know.
Right.
I thought if you got arrested, they just come picked you up and put you in the car and threw you in the can. I had no idea self-surrender was even a thing. And to me, that almost makes it worse because you're going.
Oh my gosh, I know. But, it does give you time to kind of get your affairs in order.
Yeah.
And so I ended up not getting sentenced to a minimum security camp. They ended up sending me to a maximum security federal
Holy,
detention center in the state of Washington.
holy shit. A max?
Yes.
Wow. Now that changes things dramatically because even if you think you're going away for 24 months to a camp, I mean, I feel like I don't want to go to a camp, but I feel like I can make it through a camp. But a
Yeah.
max?
Yes, it was a max. And so on the men's side, it was like a true medium max. Like and it was a co-ed prison. But on the women's side, they only had 2 dorms, but it was a detention center. So there was no outside yard. There was controlled movement. Everything, you locked down 3 times a day for count. There were cells on the door. It was like being in a county jail for 2 years, basically.
Damn. Mm.
Yes.
Is your sobriety holding up well in there?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Honestly, I never even saw drugs in there. And the place that we were at, like, everybody had 3 years or less there, so they just really wanted to go home. Like, and there
Okay.
may have been drugs coming in on the women's side, but if there were, I never saw it. Like, it was not violent where I was. It was just confinement. And so it was
Okay.
more a battle of the mind where a
Yeah.
lot of people have, the violence and the fear. It was not like that, thankfully where I was.
Yeah. Well, when you get to like that 3 year or less mark, like you said, there's typically not a lot of that. Most people just want to finish out their time and go home. But like that isolation is a big thing to battle with in there.
It is, and I actually got locked in solitary confinement, twice, but the first time was just for 10 days, and that was because me and my roommate were stealing sugar from the kitchen, and we got busted. So they put us in the cell together, and so that was just like a vacation from work because we just sat in there and talked all day. But the second time, I was working in veg prep and they came down and handcuffed me and like dressed me out into an orange jumpsuit and took me to the shoe and didn't tell me why I was in there. I was in there for 5 days before I found out why I was in there. There was no shower. And on the men's side, in their max, the men had showers in their max cell. The women, they let out Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 5 minutes for a cold shower and then stuck you back in that room. I thought I was going to lose my mind in there. Eventually, the feds show up and they were investigating me for because someone said I was sleeping with an officer. Now, he was sleeping with another inmate and she was already also in the shoe. Well, I took her job. And when I took her job, her friends told the officers and the kitchen staff that I was sleeping with him. So the feds come and they question me and they're like, we're going to give you 5 more years onto your sentence if you don't admit this and we find out you're lying. And I was like, I don't care what your threats are. I did not do that. And you can search everything you want to search. You will not find 1 ounce of evidence that ties me to doing anything like that with this officer. So I literally thought I was gonna lose my mind in that cell. They would walk by every day, just every couple, like 30 minutes, they would walk by and just stare at you like you were just an animal in in a cage in the pound, is what it felt like. Fed you through the hole in the door. You had nothing in there. And after about that first week, I finally conquered myself mentally and emotionally. And I told myself, if I can conquer me in this moment, there is nothing that I cannot do in my life. And I carried that with me in every single situation that I have walked in. And it is honestly how I've been able to be as successful as I have been since I've been out. So finally, they come back 3 weeks later and they're like, okay, our apologies. Sorry for the inconvenience. That's what they said. Sorry for the inconvenience. We know you're telling the truth. We're going to put you back out in general population. Sorry for the inconvenience. I could have snapped in there and never been the same ever again, but sorry for the inconvenience.
Sorry for the inconvenience.
Yeah.
Like they were just late getting you to an appointment or
An
something.
appointment, right. But this is the thing about prison, you're
Yeah.
just a number to them. They really don't give a shit about you in there.
No, no, they do not. There was a guy that I was in there with, and I was only in there for a short period of time in the holding, but he was asthmatic, and he kept saying he needed his inhaler, and he would go to the little thing on the wall and hit the button. He'd be like, "I need my inhaler. I need my inhaler." And it'd be like, "We got to talk to your doctor." Well, this was Sunday. No doctors are going to be able to talk to him, and like I literally thought the man was going to die right there. Like he was just so having so many issues breathing. I thought he was gonna die right there. And I don't think they would have give a shit. I don't think they would have cared at all.
We have a major problem with our justice system, and I say it all the time. Like, we needed a complete overhaul and really the only way to do that is to do away with it and start over. And I'm going to tell you, like, I know that men's prisons are bad. But women's prisons, they have never women are incarcerated at a higher rate than men are across the United States right now. And they are also um, going back at a higher rate than men are right now. And so prisons were built for men by men. Now we're incarcerating women in these prisons that were made for men by men. And you've never made accommodations for what a woman needs in incarceration. Medical care is subpar. They don't supply you with sanitary things that you need as a woman. They don't give you the counseling. You're ripping these mothers away from their children. I mean, it is a real problem. Like in the state of Georgia, in just a couple of years ago, they were still shackling women to the bed in hospitals when they were giving birth.
Wow.
Yes.
Jesus. So you finally make it out of there.
Yes.
And I asked, I've been asking a few people these last couple episodes, when you go in, and I know you had to do 2 years, right? So what was worse? Like the first 6 months of after you've got your life in order, being ripped away from it and knowing you got 2 years in front of you? Or was it the last 6 months knowing you're getting ready to go home and you're just ready to get out of there? What gives you the most anxiety?
It was the beginning for me because I walk in this pod and that door closes behind me, and I did not see sunlight until I left. There was a rec yard in our pod, and it had these vents at the top where air would flow through, and that was the extent of outside. The sun couldn't even come through it. So when I got into that pod and I saw what it was that I was walking into, probably cried for the first 5 days I was in there. I was like, "I don't know how I'm going to survive this. Like, this isn't living. This is like an animal in a pound," is what it felt like.
Jeez. So you finally do make it out. What's your
Yes.
steps after you're out?
I get out, I get to the halfway house in Atlanta. I have an illegal cell phone I'm not supposed to have because everybody had them, and I snuck it in because they told me how to sneak it in. And I start looking at the Atlanta Journal Constitution because I want a job. And there is a company that is advertising for telemarketing, sports telemarketing. Well, I had done a telemarketing job in the middle of my addiction, and I was really good at it. So I answer this ad on my legal cell phone that I'm not supposed to have, and they want to bring me in for an interview. So now I have to go. I have to go convince Mr. Jones, the halfway house director, to let me go to this interview. And so he was like, "Miss Rogers, how did you get that interview?" And I was like, "I called from the payphone." And he was like, "Yeah, right." So he approves the move. Now, let me just tell you, where I'm from, public transportation is not a thing. So I'm riding public transportation. I'm like big city. It was the funnest experience of my life. I have been confined for 2 years. Now I'm out here. I'm on the MARTA. I'm on the train. I'm free. I'm like Sex in the City minus the sex. That's what I felt like. You can't tell me anything. So I get to this interview. I walk in, I'm business suit. I got my heels in my hand because I wore tennis shoes because it was a lot of walking. I know they're going to hire me because I had decided it before I went in there. I'm in there, I'm in the interview. It's going phenomenally. And I interrupt the interview. And I said, "I just want to interrupt this interview because I want to be honest with you about who I am." And he was like, "Okay." And I say, "I just got out of a maximum security federal prison. I was a drug dealer and a drug addict, and I'm not that person anymore. And I'm going to make somebody a lot of money." And I said nothing else. And he stared at me, and I'm staring at him, and his jaw, like his mouth drops open. And I know I look crazy because I'm institutionalized. And so I'm like, I have laid my cards on the table. You have to decide if you're going to play this hand or not. He finally breaks the silence. He said, "Holy shit, I wasn't expecting that." And so he said, "Call back tomorrow. I need to speak to the owner of the company cuz I'm to see if he'll let us hire you." So I call back the next day. They say yes, and they hire me. So now I'm riding the bus, every day, and I'm going to this office and I'm selling golf course advertising, print ads over the phone, and I am just lighting it up because I'm excited and it's a fresh new start. And the base salary starting out there was $2,400 a month. Well, that was the most legal money I had ever made. And so I'm thinking, like, I'm rich, just coming straight out of prison, $2,400 a month. You can't tell me nothing. And so I'm on this phone, and it's like a real phone. And instead of hanging up the receiver, I just hit the hang up button. I dial again and I dial again and I dial again. And I outworked everybody because I just had this high on life that I was really getting an opportunity to prove not just to everybody else, but to myself that I had changed. And so my first month, I outsold the entire office and they gave me a $3,600 a month raise. And so now I'm making more money than probably the people working at the halfway house is 30 days out of prison. So
Wow.
I get released from the halfway house. I'm living with my mom in Cartersville, and she had given me this car to drive, and it was the most ugly color mirage, green, teal looking mirage you've ever seen in your life. And the air did not work in it. Now it's hot. It's the South. It's hot. When I get up and leave to go to work in the mornings, I'd leave at like 5 o'clock to miss traffic. So it's still cool. It's dark. By the time I would leave to go home, I'd be driving from East Atlanta to Cartersville. For anybody that doesn't know, it's like an hour and a half, no traffic. You can't move in the evenings in Atlanta traffic. So I've got all the windows down and I'm like in a business outfit, right? I'm sweating. I mean, I am soaked in sweat. I have sat in my own sweat for probably an hour and 30 minutes before I ever hit Cherokee County and the traffic opens up. So finally, the traffic opens up, and now the wind is blowing. And so it's blowing my soaking wet hair, and my hair is like this. It's just out from my head everywhere by the time I get home from work, and I am so mad, and I'm tired, and my mom is like, "What is wrong with you? Why aren't you talking?" I was like, "I'm hot, and I'm tired, and I'm institutionalized, and nobody understands what I'm going through." I was like having a breakdown because I'm trying to like really change my life, and I'm like, "But this shit is hard," because had not lived like a normal life in a long time. So eventually, the owner of the company ends up loaning me the money to buy a car that had air in it. And I just paid it back out of my bonus check. Thank God. But 6 months into being out, they offered me a manager at large position to travel the country and open up offices for them, training people on how to sell over the phone because I had done so well. And my life just took off, and I just did not look back.
That is like the stories that I just love to hear.
Yeah,
And, they're not often heard, but I love the fact that we can tell them and spread it because it gives people hope.
yeah,
Because so many people think when they come out of jail, like it's going to be so hard to find a job and you're never going to be able to make any money. And then you have to weigh that factor of like when you were in that meeting, you could have very well not told them that. And then if
yeah.
they would have found out, then they might have would have, not hired you. But you were honest and you laid it on the table and they accepted you for who you were, flaws and all, and you took off with it. That's so cool, man. Are you still with them?
I'm not. So I stayed
Okay.
there for 8.5 years. In the midst of all of that, I fought custody for my daughter. I had been home, I think, 2.5 years, maybe 3 years, and I fought custody of her and I won custody of her back, full custody.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And after about 8.5 years, I just was in this place where I knew that I was being called to like something different, that my life, I had outgrown the company, is really what it was.
Mhm.
And so I had an opportunity to go interview at a fintech company, which is financial technology. I knew that my background was going to be an issue. So I just like prayed about it before I went in there. I was like, God, if this is where I'm supposed to go, just open the door so I can walk through it because now I'm like polished. I'm corporate. I've lived this fabulous kind of rich lifestyle with this company because I was making a lot of money there. And so I walk into this third and final interview. I'm sitting with the founder who has founded fintech all over the world. Her name's Catherine Petralia. And this is like a culture fit interview. They want to see if you're an asshole. So before we even get to the questions that trigger you, she asked me, she said, if there is one mistake in your life that you regret, what is it and why? So she just opened the door and I walked through. I started at 13 years old. I told her my entire life story and she's leaned in like this eating her snacks. She was like, "Oh my god, I feel like I'm watching a Lifetime movie." And so after I finally finished, she sets her stuff down and she squares her shoulders and she said, "I don't have any more questions. When can you start?" So I worked for them, outsold the whole sales company my first month on the floor. Um, Proved to them that cold calling for that product would work because they had tried it and it failed. And then I was on their leadership team. I managed a couple of their sales teams, and eventually I became bored doing that. And at that time, I had started to speak with the Department of Justice. So they had, asked me would I be willing to come and tell my story. And so I was speaking with them, and working at this company gave me the ability to be able to do that. So I sat at home one weekend and I started to brainstorm, how have I made money, which was all phone sales? And what is it that I'm passionate about? And it was prison reform, but particularly women, because I understood the pain of being a mom and losing your child, then getting them back and that child hating you and therapists quitting on you. Like, I understood the parts of the story that nobody wants to talk about. And
Right.
so I literally came up with my first company, which is National Association of Women's Prison Reform, and it was going to be a telemarketing advertising company. I knew I was going to need funding for that. So I went and I spoke with Catherine Petralia and I told her I was starting this company. And she was like, and I asked her, did she have any advice? And she was like, my gosh, Jennifer, you don't need advice from me. You've overcome more things in your life than I could ever even think about overcoming. However, if there's anything I can do for you, please let me know. So I started to think after that, they had outsourced cold calling to this company, and they outsourced it because they believed that it would work based on a test that I did and it failed. And so I go back to Catherine and I say, y'all have outsourced cold calling twice and y'all believe that it would work because of me. And before I could even ask her, she said, yes, we will give you a contract. So they ended up hiring my company and contracting my company, which was a company that was only hiring convicted felon women, to cold call loans for them. And their whole legal department was mad about it. We got into this big war at the table trying to get through the red tape because they didn't like that, they were hiring, my company that was hiring convicted felons. We killed that contract. Month one, we overshot the quota by 250%. And every single month we grew and we grew and we grew. Then I brought in the advertising product that I had designed. Now I've got 2 rooms running. We're on track to clear 1 million in revenue that year. And then COVID happens and shuts us completely down.
Oh, shit.
Yes. And now here I am, and I'm stuck being a stay at home mom with my 2 children that I realized I did not know between the hours of 8 and 5 because that's when my career normally was. And I am dealing with them. And now I'm also trying to figure out how to save this company. So I brainstormed and I ended up bringing it back as a national advertising company only because we lost our contract. And that contract was paying my company $30,000 a month. So it was funding everything. And
Mm,
so when we lost that contract because COVID, everybody's cutting off everything and the contracts were the first thing to go. So
yeah.
now we're cold calling real estate agents, which is what our advertising product is in. They're answering the phone because it's COVID and everybody's stuck at home. So we have now 60 new contracts under our belt. We're coming back July, I believe it was 5th, as a national advertising company. I've hired new women. It's now a fresh new baby company. That's on a Wednesday. And then Saturday morning, my daughter was 16 years old at the time, wakes up deathly ill, and she ended up having a ruptured brain aneurysm and almost dying.
Jesus.
Yes. So now here I am in Emory Neuro ICU. She's fighting for my life. I've got this brand new company that I've just started back. I'm the only person allowed in there with her because it's COVID. I've got customers calling me on my phone complaining, and I just couldn't bring myself to shut it down then because I'm like, where these women have nowhere to go. I don't want to just cut it off and just send them out, especially during COVID, they won't survive. And so I was conflicted. So I kept it going. She's fighting for her life. It doesn't look like she's going to live. And eventually, during that 6 weeks period of time, she started to get better. And that near death experience is what fixed our relationship, because our relationship was still very broken. And so when we walked out of there, you would have never known that we spent a day apart from each other at any point in her life. I get out of the hospital with her. I go back into the office, but we were so in the red at that point from COVID and me carrying everybody. It just became about a number at that point and hitting a number. And my heart wasn't in it for the social reform that it was. And then I ended up getting pregnant and I lose the baby and I hemorrhage from losing that baby. And I'm in the hospital and I'm losing control and function of my body. And it was in that moment that I realized that if you removed the accolades, the articles, the radio shows, the interviews, the Jennifer Rogers influencer, if you took all of that away, I couldn't tell you who I was. I couldn't tell you what brought me joy. I couldn't talk to you about anything other than my story and my work. And it was in that moment that I made a decision to walk away from all of it. And I went on a spiritual journey to find myself. And that's what I did.
Wow. I was not expecting all that.
Yes.
Where
I'm full of surprises, Hollywood Wade.
I know, I see that every time I turn around, I think I know where it's going, and we take a left, and then we're back.
Yes.
Where did your journey take you? Are you still on it?
Well, it's an evolving process, but this has been about 5 or 6 years ago at this point. So during that process, I ended up, I did some inner child healing sessions. I went on these plant medicine spiritual journeys. I found God within myself. I woke up to my higher self. I realized that all of these decisions that I had made in my life were still coming from this place of unworthiness within myself that started from my early childhood, that felt like I wasn't good enough. Even I wasn't good enough for the life that I was living. And on the outside, people would look at my life and, they would find hope in it and they would think, gosh, I want to be that. But what they didn't realize is that I would cry myself to sleep at night sometimes because I was so lonely. And I couldn't ever allow someone to really love me because I felt like they never knew me because I didn't know me. So, how can you love me if you don't know me? And I can't even show you who I really am because I'm not sure who that is. And so I began to unpack my inner child wounds. I began to unpack the unworthiness, the abuse, and the assaults and things that I had experienced in my life. And I began to heal those things. And as I began to sit with myself in one of my most powerful journeys, I sat in the presence of God. And I realized for the first time at 36, 37 years old that I really was a good person, that no matter what I had done, it did not negate the fact that I am worthy of love because I am love. And so during that time frame, I wrote a book. It's called The You Within. It's about finding hope, purpose, and your authentic self before all the crap that's happened to you in your life. And I have been the VP of sales of an agricultural solar company. I recently stepped away from that role because it no longer was in alignment for where I wanted my life to go. And I'm full time at this point coaching one on one clients. I deal with people that have active drug addictions. I do business coaching. I do one on one therapy sessions for people that are just looking to find themselves. They want to take the mask off. They want to have joy. They want to have peace. They want to have love. And then I also take people on spiritual journeys. And so plant medicine is involved. And so that's a lot of the bulk of the work that I do now. And I also do public speaking. I am actually restarting up my organization, National Association of Women's Prison Reform. But it won't be employment anymore. It's going to take it back to some of the philanthropy things that I was doing, which was hosting events for the incarcerated around the holidays and things like that for their children, for the parents. And that was a big part of what I was doing when I had my organization. So I'm about to reopen that part of it up again.
Well, congratulations, Jennifer. This has been one of the most amazing like stories that I think I've ever heard. I've been doing this a long time and I've talked to a lot of people, but I mean, I'm very rarely speechless, but I think I'm speechless right now.
Well, you probably say that to everybody.
And I promise you, I do not. Watch all my videos and you'll find out. No, seriously. I mean, it's just you seem like you when you got out, you set your mind to something, you excelled at it, and then it was just like you were steady, like steady going, steady on the move. Just out of
Yeah.
curiosity, from like a point of view where I come from, when I had my situation going on, I felt like I always had to be doing something. And so when I
Yeah.
started the podcast, that was really the perfect thing for me is it's kind of a never ending thing, right? You do one this week and it's all you're already thinking about the next week and then the next week and the next guest and you're trying to put in see if you can incorporate something that's going on right now. It's just a steady flow of you know, your mind is staying busy. And during
Yeah.
like the stressful time like that, if I'd ever didn't have nothing going on, that's when like it would really start to bother me. Was that something that was, it was ever played you? Did you feel like you have to keep going through that whole
Oh,
time?
oh, for sure. And you know what? It's funny because even today, my best friend, who is actually, she started as my spiritual mentor, taking me on journeys, helping me work on my own spiritual gifts, and then training me on how to help other people, do that for other people. I am I'm the type of person that I can't sit still. I'm
Yeah.
always cleaning and I'm always busy and I'm always doing these things, and I, like, got in that mode today and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this carpet, like, these stains on this carpet, it's driving me up the wall." And she looked at me and she said, "You know, those stains on that carpet are not a reflection of you." And that hit me so deep because she said, there was a time in your life when you were little that you felt that way. And she said, and you've done all of this work on yourself and you no longer have to carry that. She said, "Do you know what those stains on that carpet represent?" She said, "It represents that you have a home with children that are loved, that are able to live in this home and be themselves, and that is it." She said, "Those stains on that carpet do not represent you." And I really had to sit with that for a second, because when you've been through the life that I've been through, that you've been through, and even if you've never been to jail or prison or been addicted, you can identify with this, because at some point in your life, and it is typically in your childhood, there is someone that created a stain in your life. They planted a seed in your life that took up root, and in that seed and in that root, it is, I have to show up and I have to prove that I am worthy. And I have to stay busy, because if I'm not busy, I'm lazy. And I have to earn love, because I'm not worthy of love if I'm not earning it. And those are the things that keep people trapped in these generational cycles of overworked, sometimes underpaid and overworked, feeling unworthy, feeling like I'm always chasing this dangling carrot in front of me. And the reality is, until you heal that part of yourself, it doesn't matter how much success you ever find, it will never be enough. Never, because you don't believe that you're enough.
Wow. That's deep. I felt like we just had a counseling session.
We did. If you'd like to sign up, you can.
Well, speaking of that, let everybody know like any socials, websites, or whatever you have. We can obviously put a link up for the book as well. But anything
Okay.
you want to plug before we wrap up?
Yes, so you can find all of my information with my one-on-one. You can submit a form on my website. It is www.fillyourcup.club. Instagram, the Jennifer Rogers. TikTok, same thing, the Jennifer Rogers. And if you would like my email, it's just Jenn, Jenn Rogers at nawpr.org, or just go to my website and you can find me that way.
Jennifer, I can't thank you enough for coming on. This episode has been one for the books. I I'm literally floored. I cannot wait for this thing to come out. It's such a great message, and I've said this on the last few podcasts. It was a quote that somebody told me not too long ago, and it really hit home, and it epitomizes everything that you've said in this episode. And it's everybody falls in water, but you only drown if you stay there. And
Yeah.
obviously, you didn't stay there. You swam, you got up, and you're killing it. And congratulations on your success. And we wish you wishing nothing but the best going forward.
Thank you so much, and I'm so grateful for you to have had me on the show. I really did appreciate and I actually enjoyed it.
Oh, well,
It was
that's good.
really good. Yes,
Well, that's
no,
good.
it was a great conversation. I've done a lot of these, and sometimes we get so caught up in the crime and the drama and all that, and that's all fun. We can get on here and laugh, and I can tell my story for 4 hours and keep you laughing.
Yeah,
But, I think the important part is let's get into the weeds of it, because
yeah.
that's where people are stuck at, is in
Mhm.
the weeds. And if we keep highlighting only the crime, only for entertainment, and even though, it is entertaining because you get these wild stories, and it is fun to listen, to laugh, but we also got to be able to get in the weeds so we can pull people out of them. And so I appreciate
Exactly.
you allowing it to go into that direction.
Absolutely, 100%. That's what we love to do is, obviously everybody comes on here has a story. It's not always glamorous, it's not always pretty, but the bulk have been able to pull themselves out. And that's the important thing is let somebody know no matter how bad it got or, how crazy you were, how far on the ledge you were out there, you can reel
Yeah.
it back in if you can. So we
Yeah.
appreciate you coming on and telling your story very much.
Thank you so much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it for this episode of Crime and Entertainment. Jennifer, we appreciate it. Thank you.